So, Family Dog is a show that, back in 2022, I added to my large list of shows that I would take a look at for Sean's network reviews. Basically, as one of the earlier entries, given that this show was one of the shorter shows on my huge binge list. And in retrospect, if I was not as thoroughly exhausted as I was at the end of 2022, this show would have been one of the angry reviews. Sorry to spoil this review extremely soon before getting into it, but this show is awful. No exaggeration. Like, I knew when getting back into binge-watching shows that I was going to run into shows that I would end up disliking, and not only did I run into one of these shows that I dislike heavily, sooner than I imagined that I would, but I didn't expect that it would be one of the worst shows I'd ever run into. Oh yeah, I'm going there. Not only is this one of the worst shows that I reviewed in Sean's network reviews so far, but it's also a contender for the worst cartoons of the 1990s, and possible consideration for one of the worst cartoons that I've ever seen, period. So, what's this show about? Well, this show revolves around Megward the Wizard in dog form, created by Brad Bird and was produced by Steven Spielberg of all people. He lives in a dysfunctional household, because this was around the era when several people tried to cash in on The Simpsons' popularity, because it apparently worked so well when other shows were trying to cash in on Ren and Stimpy as well, and the dog in particular has to go through literal torture in literally every single episode of the series. And that's not even an exaggeration. That's the most generous view of the show that I could give. To describe the exact issue that I have with this show, how can I describe the show in the best way I could? Take one of the worst SpongeBob episodes. I'm talking A Pal for Gary, Pet Sitter Pat, and even episodes that aren't even bad, but have the aspect of SpongeBob not understanding what Gary wants, and then fuse it with stressed Eric. That's what Family Dog is about. The best word to use to describe Family Dog is unfair. Now, the word mean-spirited gets tossed around a lot. It's a word that is used to describe something that has an aura to it where something is mean, to the point where it would make you become frustrated. But it's also a word that has kind of lost its meaning, because oftentimes, this word would be used as a weapon against shows that are liked in spite of this. And I personally do have a few shows that I like in spite of this. As I stated before, people have written off shows like Eek the Cat and Nightmare Ned, even though those shows were able to throw in elements to help out their mean-spirited angle, to not make it something to really affect them that badly. So, with that being said, Family Dog is one of those shows that definitely falls into the category of being a problem with this. And no amount of, ooh, you're taking this show too seriously, is going to help this show out in the long run. Because unlike some other shows that have this, where you could argue that they do it for comedic purposes, even some infamous shows like Coconut Fred Fruit Salad Island, the way that this show depicts this mean-spirited angle is in a way where it's not at all comedic. In fact, this show is honestly what it would have been like if Courage the Cowardly Dog was executed in a way where it was realistic, which automatically makes this show 10 times more scarier than Courage. And I mean that in a bad way. For the simple fact that this show is what I could consider as a torture porn show. And this torture porn show is happening to a realistic depiction of a dog, not an exaggerated version of the dog. But I'd honestly have to state right now that this is arguably one of the worst torture porn shows that I've ever seen. Because even in shows like Cat Dog or Stressed Eric, while yes, the characters in those shows get the short end of the stick a lot of the time, the characters that do get this torment have the ability to fight back against those who hurt them. The Family Dog in this show doesn't have the ability to do that, making it feel very one-sided, as well as how extremely sad it is at the same time. The moments in this series that are specifically egregious are the points where, to give context, the Family Dog is in love with this other female dog, and there are repeated moments in the series where they teased him being able to make love with her, only to then take it away from him, as well as giving him an opportunity to find him a new owner in the 9th episode, as in, she's a lot more caring to him than his actual family, only to then proceed to take it away from him because her boyfriend doesn't like dogs. Which is kind of sad when thinking about it, because she cares more about him than his actual family does. But honestly, that is nothing compared to the fact that every single character in this show is an absolute jerk. I honestly have no clue why this dog continues to stay with his owners, because of the simple fact that they don't treat him like he's a living being who deserves as much love as everyone else in the family. No, they treat him like property rather than someone to treat with respect. Going back to the 9th episode real quick, they're not concerned about their dog because they love him. They treat him like an object, which is entirely plausible given that the 7th episode gives us a flashback showing that his family only got him because the younger and more naive Billy chose him. It would be one thing if the dog in specific was a jerk that you'd love to hate. That's why Sylvester from Looney Tunes is such a lovable antagonist. But because this dog is depicted as a normal dog in this show, he's not a jerk at all. He's just a regular dog that, to be honest, I think deserves to be with a much better family than these guys. Heck, at this point, this dog would be better off staying with Muriel and Eustace than this family. Because even though these guys act as if they care about their dog, they certainly don't show it at all in this show. I mean, yeah, in some episodes, Bev tells Billy to stop teasing the dog, and at the very least, they tell Billy to keep an eye on him, but those moments where they show any sort of care towards him are very rare, because before that, the show constantly feels the need to have them yell at him, and because the dog can't talk at all, nor is he anthropomorphic, he can't defend himself at all, adding an extra layer of awful to this series. The entire plot of the first episode is about this, where the dog is incredibly thirsty, and he's unable to communicate his wants and needs to his family, all while the show constantly teases him, making him think he's finally going to get water, only to then completely take it away from him. And this even goes past the first episode. Bev and Skip, in nearly every single sequence of this show, whenever they so much as see the family dog being a dog, they constantly act like Eustace Bagg by calling him a stupid dog. Yes, dogs do need to have discipline whenever they do something wrong. And yes, he does do wrong things in this show, but most of the stuff that he does in this show were by pure accident or through him not knowing any better. And at many other points, this could be taken way too far. Billy is a character that, to be blunt, deserves to be signed up for military school, or should be taken away from his enabling parents, because there is clearly something wrong with this child, and the parents seem to not be doing anything about him, which is extremely concerning. When it gets up to the point where he's playing with fire, to the point of leaving it in his trash, causing a house fire in the process, it clearly shows how psychotic this child is. And I don't buy the idea that he would be concerned with the fact that he killed a mother bird after terrorizing everyone during a winter snow day, because this seems right up his alley, because of how downright psychotic he is. Heck, in episode 4, he along with the rest of the family act incredibly apathetic towards how fearful the family dog is around the neighbor's new dog, K10. Billy being the most apathetic by repeatedly being excited to the idea of K10 eating the family dog. Like, what on earth is this kid's problem? And as I mentioned earlier in this review, the way that this show depicts the dog that it's downright torturing for most of the series as realistic is a serious problem with the show. But another major issue that I have with this series is that it feels halfway stuck between wanting to be realistic and wanting to be all exaggerated at the exact same time, which creates this massive tonal problem in the series, where the dog is able to do things that aren't believable, despite being depicted as being realistic. This is honestly why I think that they should have made the family dog more anthropomorphized, being more like how Spike from Tom and Jerry was, to make things more exaggerated, so that it wouldn't be as difficult to watch. There's a reason as to why people don't like the early Tom and Jerry shorts, because listening to a realistic cat in pain is not pleasant to watch in a cartoon show. And that's exactly the kind of feeling that I get from this show. And on top of this show being a torture porn series, this show is so obnoxious. One thing that I don't get from the 7th episode of this series is how the other characters can be annoyed by this music that these beach delinquents are blasting out loud when the entirety of the series is like this. And to be as clear as day, this show's obnoxiousness doesn't necessarily come from the fact that this show has grating voice acting or loud noises, like Thundercat's roar or Robot Boy. No, this show being as annoying as it is, comes from the characters and how they frequently talk over and argue with each other. As well as throwing in a bunch of grating sound effects, because it's already enough that this show tortures an innocent animal, similarly to Stressed Eric, but did they seriously have to throw in the obnoxiousness and sound effects too? Is this show trying to make me mad or something? No. This show is one of the worst. It's definitely not the worst show that I reviewed in Sean's Network reviews so far, but it's definitely bottom 10 material worthy. The Gene Deitch Tom and Jerry shorts, The Adventures of Bernie, Ollie's Pack, even the Tom and Jerry comedy show. They're all better than whatever this show is. I may not be a dog person myself, I'm more of a cat person myself, but even then, this needs to be stated. If you are a dog lover, or an animal lover in general, in any sort of way, avoid this show like the plague. There is a reason as to why this show only lasted 10 episodes, because even back during the time of this show's release on television, it was panned heavily for its, quote, cheap production values. Even though the production values are honestly one of the least offensive things about it. And instead, just watch Courage the Cowardly Dog. That show does everything that this show tries to do, and they do it a million times better. With more likable characters, and making it so that the title character is able to fight back against those who intimidate him. While for this show, a lot of people have forgotten about it, and after sitting through every single episode, this show was forgotten about for a very good reason.
Everything